The dust-covered stranger rode into Deadwood, South Dakota on a Thursday morning in June of 1878, carrying nothing but a bedroll, a rifle, and a fistful of wildflowers that seemed wildly out of place in his calloused hands. Nora Owens noticed him from the window of her father's general store, where she stood arranging bolts of fabric that had arrived on the morning stage. She was 22 years old, with dark hair she kept pinned back in a practical bun, and eyes the color of the Missouri River at dawn. Her father had died 3 months prior, leaving her the store and a mountain of debt that seemed to grow taller with each passing week. She had no time for strangers, especially not cowboys who looked like they had more dust than dollars to their name. The stranger dismounted his horse, a sturdy roan that looked as road-weary as its rider, and tied the reins to the hitching post outside the saloon. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with sun-darkened skin and dark blonde hair that curled slightly at his collar. His clothes were worn but clean, and there was something in the way he moved that suggested careful deliberation, as though he thought through each action before committing to it. He glanced around the main street of Deadwood, taking in the false-fronted buildings, the muddy thoroughfare, and the various establishments that catered to miners, gamblers, and those seeking fortune in the Black Hills. Nora turned away from the window, chiding herself for staring. She had work to do. The inventory needed counting, the shelves needed stocking, and Mrs. Patterson would be by later to settle her account, which was already 2 months overdue. She could not afford distractions, especially not in the form of drifters who would likely be gone before the week was out. But an hour later, the bell above the store's door chimed, and when Nora looked up from the ledger where she was recording purchases, the stranger stood in the doorway. Up close, she could see his eyes were a startling shade of green, like new spring grass after rain. "Morning, miss," he said, removing his hat. His voice was deep and quiet with a slight drawl that suggested origins further south. "I am looking for work. Wondered if you might know of anyone hiring." Nora set down her pencil. "Depends on what kind of work you are after." "The mines are always looking for men willing to go underground, if you do not mind the danger and the dark." "I was hoping for something above ground, if possible. I have experience with horses, cattle, building work. I am handy with repairs." He glanced around the store, his gaze landing on a sagging shelf in the corner. "That shelf there looks like it could use some attention before it dumps your merchandise on the floor." Nora followed his gaze. The shelf had been worrying her for weeks, but she had neither the time nor the skill to fix it properly. "It has been on my list," she admitted. "I could fix it for you," the stranger offered. "Would not take more than an hour, and I would only ask for a fair price." She studied him carefully, weighing her limited funds against the certain loss if that shelf collapsed. "What is a fair price? How about you pay me in information instead of coin? I fix your shelf, and you tell me who in town might have steady work for a man willing to earn his keep." It was an unusual offer, but Nora found herself nodding. "All right. There are tools in the back room. Help yourself." "Name's Owen Ryder, by the way," he said, extending his hand. She hesitated only a moment before shaking it. His grip was firm but not crushing, his palm rough with calluses. "Nora Owens. Pleasure to meet you, Miss Owens." He settled his hat back on his head and headed toward the back room. Nora tried to return her attention to the ledger, but she found her gaze drifting toward the back room, where she could hear the sounds of wood being moved and tools being selected. She told herself it was simple caution, making sure this stranger was not stealing from her, but truthfully, she was curious. There was something about Owen Ryder that seemed different from the usual drifters who passed through Deadwood. Something solid and dependable, though she reminded herself that appearances could be deceiving. True to his word, Owen had the shelf repaired within the hour. He reinforced the supports, replaced a cracked board, and made sure everything was level and secure. When he finished, he cleaned up the wood shavings and returned the tools to their proper places. "That should hold now," he said, testing the shelf with his weight. "You could stock it full of tinned goods and it would not budge." "Thank you," Nora said, genuinely impressed. "As for work, you might try the Patterson Ranch about 5 miles north of town. They run cattle and are always needing hands, especially now with the summer drives coming up. Tom Patterson is fair, pays on time, and his wife Sarah runs a decent kitchen. You would not go hungry." Owen nodded, absorbing the information. "I appreciate it, Miss Owens." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Those wildflowers I was carrying when I rode in, I left them with my saddlebag. Would you mind if I brought them to you? Seems a shame for them to wilt in the sun, and a store run by a lady ought to have some flowers in it." Before Nora could respond, he was out the door. He returned moments later with the bundle of wildflowers, their colors bright against the dim interior of the store. There were Indian paintbrush blooms in shades of red and orange, purple lupines, and delicate white columbines. "These grow wild in the hills," Owen said, setting them carefully on the counter. "Thought they might brighten up wherever I ended up." Nora found herself smiling despite her resolve to remain businesslike. "They are lovely. I do not have a proper vase, but I suppose a mason jar will do." "A mason jar suits wildflowers just fine," Owen said. "Well, I will let you get back to your work. Thank you again for the information." After he left, Nora filled a mason jar with water and arranged the wildflowers. They did brighten the store, adding a splash of color to the practical shelves of dry goods and tools. She caught herself smiling at them several times throughout the rest of the day. Owen Ryder did indeed find work at the Patterson Ranch. Tom Patterson, a gruff man in his 50s with a weathered face and sharp eyes, hired him on the spot after seeing him handle a fractious horse with patience and skill. The work was hard, the days long, but Owen had never been afraid of hard work. He bunked with the other ranch hands in a long, low building near the barn, ate his meals at the communal table, and earned his keep by tending cattle, mending fences, and doing whatever else needed doing on a working ranch. But every Sunday, his day off, Owen rode into Deadwood. And every Sunday, he brought wildflowers to Nora's store. The second time he came, Nora was helping a customer and merely nodded her thanks as he set a fresh bundle on the counter. They were wild roses this time, pale pink and fragrant. The third week, she had the mason jar already empty and waiting. The fourth week, she found herself watching the door, anticipating his arrival. "You have got an admirer," her friend Lily mentioned one afternoon. Lily worked at the dress shop next door and often stopped by during slow periods to chat. She was a cheerful woman of 25, married to the town's blacksmith, with a talent for noticing things others missed. "He is just being friendly," Nora protested, though she felt her cheeks warm. "Friendly is nodding hello on the street," Lily said. "Bringing wildflowers every single week, that is courting behavior, Nora. He has never even stayed to talk. He just leaves the flowers and goes about his business. Maybe he is shy. Or maybe he is waiting for you to give him some encouragement." Lily grinned. "When was the last time you had any fun? You have been working yourself to the bone since your father passed, God rest his soul. Would it kill you to smile at the man?" "I do smile at him," Nora said defensively. "A real smile, not your thank you for your patronage store smile." Nora threw a spool of thread at her friend, who laughed and dodged. But after Lily left, Nora found herself thinking about her words. It was true that she had little time for anything beyond keeping the store running and managing her dwindling finances. Her father had been ill for a long time before his death, and the medical bills had consumed most of their savings. She was behind on several shipments and constantly juggling which creditors to pay first. Romance seemed like a luxury she could not afford, but the Wildflowers kept coming. Week after week, Owen Ryder rode into town and brought her flowers. Different varieties depending on the season and what was blooming in the hills. Sometimes lupines and larkspur, sometimes sunflowers and black-eyed Susans, sometimes delicate purple asters. She found herself learning the names of flowers she had never paid attention to before, asking the occasional customer who might know. Looking through an old botanical guide she found in a box of her father's books. Summer deepened into August, and the heat settled over Deadwood like a heavy blanket. The store became stifling in the afternoons, and Nora took to keeping the door propped open to catch any hint of breeze. Business was slow, the heat driving most people indoors during the worst of the day. She was dozing over her ledger one particularly sweltering afternoon when the sound of raised voices outside drew her attention. Through the open door, she could see a commotion near the bank. A man on horseback was shouting, waving a pistol in the air. Two more men emerged from the bank, saddlebags bulging. Bank robbery. Nora's heart hammered as she quickly moved away from the door, pressing herself against the wall. Gunshots rang out, sharp cracks that made her flinch. She heard screaming, the thunder of hooves, more gunshots. Then silence. Cautiously, Nora peered out. Several townspeople were emerging from buildings, moving toward the bank. She saw Sheriff Coleman on the ground, clutching his arm, blood seeping between his fingers. The robbers were gone, disappeared down the main road in a cloud of dust. The next hours were chaotic. The doctor was summoned to tend to the sheriff, who had taken a bullet through the arm but would survive. The bank manager was beside himself, ranting about the stolen money. Several men formed a posse to chase the robbers, though they returned hours later having lost the trail in the rocky hills. It was nearly evening when Owen Ryder appeared at the store. His face was grim, his clothes dusty from hard riding. "Are you all right?" he asked without preamble. "I heard there was trouble in town." "I am fine," Nora assured him. "Frightened but unharmed. Were you with the posse?" "Yes. We lost them in the hills near Spearfish Canyon." He looked frustrated, angry even. They knew the territory, had the route planned. This was not their first robbery. Sheriff Coleman was shot. He will recover, but it was a close thing. Owen's jaw tightened. This territory has too few lawmen and too many outlaws. It is only going to get worse as more gold is discovered, and more people flood in seeking their fortunes. He seemed to remember himself then, to remember that he had burst into her store without his usual polite greeting. "I apologize, Miss Owens. I should not be troubling you with this. It is no trouble. I appreciate your concern." Nora found herself genuinely touched that he had come to check on her. "Can I get you anything? Water? Coffee?" "No, thank you. I should get back to the ranch." "Mr. Patterson will be wanting a report." He moved toward the door, then paused. "Would you mind if I stopped by tomorrow? Not Sunday, I know, but I would feel better checking that you are all right after the shock of today." "I would not mind at all," Nora said softly. Owen did return the next day, and the day after that. The excuse was always practical. He needed to purchase supplies for the ranch, or he was delivering a message from Mrs. Patterson, or he happened to be in town and thought he would check if Nora needed any more repairs done. But the visits stretched longer each time, evolving from brief exchanges into actual conversations. Nora learned that Owen was from Texas originally, from a small town near Austin. His father had been a rancher, his mother a schoolteacher. Both had died of fever when Owen was 19, and he had sold the struggling ranch to pay their debts. He had been drifting since then, working ranches across the West, never staying anywhere too long. Why not? Nora asked one afternoon as she helped him carry supplies out to his horse. It was September now, the heat finally breaking, the air crisp with the promise of autumn. Owen secured the bundle behind his saddle before answering. I suppose I have been looking for something, though I could not rightly say what. A place that feels like home, maybe. Texas stopped feeling like home after my parents died. Every place I have worked since has just been a place, if that makes sense. Somewhere to sleep and earn wages, but not somewhere that matters. And does Deadwood feel like home? Nora asked, surprising herself with her boldness. He looked at her then, really looked at her, with those green eyes that seemed to see more than they should. It is starting to, he said quietly. The air between them suddenly felt charged, full of words unspoken. Nora found she could not look away, could not break the gaze. Her heart was beating too fast, and she felt a warmth that had nothing to do with the temperature. Nora, the shout broke the moment. They both turned to see Lily hurrying toward them, her face flushed with excitement. You have to come quick. There is a man here from Denver, says he is interested in buying property in Deadwood. He wants to look at several buildings, including the store. What? Why would he want to buy the store? Nora felt a spike of panic. She had not considered that someone might try to buy her out from under her debts. I do not know, but he is talking to everyone on the street, throwing money around like he has barrels of it. Come on. Lily grabbed Nora's arm, pulling her away. Nora glanced back at Owen, who nodded. Go on. I will see you Sunday. The man from Denver turned out to be Harold Marsh, a businessman who had made his fortune in mining speculation and was now buying up property in promising towns throughout the Black Hills. He was in his 40s, well-dressed, with slicked-back hair and a calculating look in his eyes. He offered Nora a price for the store and the land it sat on, a price that would be enough to clear her debts and leave her with a modest sum besides. Think about it, Miss Owens, he said smoothly, handing her his card. I am staying at the Grand Hotel for the next week. This is a generous offer, more than you are likely to get from anyone else. A young woman like you should not be burdening herself with business concerns. Take the money, find yourself a husband, let someone else worry about ledgers and inventory. Nora felt her temper flare at his condescending tone, but she kept her expression neutral. I will consider your offer, Mr. Marsh. Good day. After he left, she stood in the empty store, looking around at the shelves her father had built, at the familiar smell of coffee and leather and tobacco, at the counter worn smooth by years of transactions. This store was all she had left of her father, the legacy he had left her. But it was also a constant struggle, a weight around her neck. Marsh's offer would free her from debt, give her options. She could move to a bigger city, start fresh somewhere else. She could even get married if she wanted, though the only man who had interested her in years was a cowboy who brought her wildflowers and had never even tried to kiss her. That Sunday, Owen arrived with his usual bundle of flowers. They were late-season blooms, hardy little flowers in shades of gold and russet that matched the changing leaves on the aspens in the hills. He set them on the counter, then seemed to notice Nora's troubled expression. What is wrong? He asked. Nora had not intended to share her dilemma, but something about Owen's steady presence loosened her tongue. She told him about Harold Marsh and his offer, about her debts and her doubts, about her conflicted feelings over selling the store. Owen listened without interrupting, his face thoughtful. When she finished, he was quiet for a long moment before speaking. What do you want to do? Not what makes financial sense, not what anyone else thinks you should do. What do you want? No one had asked her that, Nora realized, everyone had opinions. Lily thought she should sell and finally have some security. Mrs. Patterson thought she should keep the store because her father would have wanted her to. The bank manager thought she should sell because a woman could not successfully run a business alone. But no one had asked what Nora herself wanted. "I want to keep it," she said slowly, the words feeling true as she spoke them. "This store is my father's legacy, yes, but it is also mine now. I have kept it running. I have managed the inventory and the accounts. I have built relationships with customers and suppliers. I am proud of what I have done here. I do not want to give that up just because it is hard." Owen smiled, a genuine smile that transformed his usually serious face. "Then do not give it up. Find another way. The debt can be managed. You said yourself you are keeping up with payments just barely. What if you increased business, expanded what you offer? I have noticed you do not stock much in the way of ranching supplies, and there are dozens of ranches in the area. If ranchers could buy their supplies here in town instead of sending away for them, that would be steady business." Nora felt a flicker of hope. "That would require capital I do not have. I would need to purchase inventory upfront. What if you had a partner, someone who could invest capital in exchange for a share of the business?" "I do not know anyone with that kind of money who would be interested in a partnership," Nora said. Owen reached into his pocket and pulled out a leather pouch. He set it on the counter with a heavy thunk. "I have been saving my wages since I arrived in Deadwood. Living at the ranch, I have few expenses. I know it is not a fortune, but it is enough to purchase a decent amount of inventory. I would be willing to invest it in the store in exchange for a partnership." Nora stared at the pouch, then at Owen. "Why would you do that? You barely know me." "I know you well enough to see that you are hardworking, honest, and smart. Those are the qualities I would want in a business partner." He paused. "And I would like to put down roots here in Deadwood. Having a stake in a business would give me reason to stay, to build something lasting." It was a practical explanation, but Nora sensed there was more to it. She thought about the flowers he had been bringing her every week for months now, about the way he looked at her, about the way her heart beat faster when he was near. This was about more than business, for both of them, though neither seemed quite ready to say it out loud. "I would need to think about it," Nora said carefully. "Of course, take your time." Owen picked up the pouch but then set it back down. "Keep this for now. Whether you decide to accept my partnership offer or not, consider it a loan to help with the store. You can pay me back when the business improves." "Owen, I cannot just take your savings. You are not taking it. I am investing it, in the store and in Deadwood and in—" He trailed off, seeming to lose his nerve. "Just think about it, Nora, please." After he left, Nora opened the pouch. There were several $100s inside, more than she had expected. It was clearly everything Owen had saved, his entire nest egg, and he was willing to risk it on her, on a store that might still fail despite their best efforts. The trust implicit in that gesture moved her deeply. Over the next few days, Nora found herself thinking constantly about Owen's offer. She drew up lists of supplies she could stock, calculated potential profits, tried to project whether the expansion would attract enough new business to justify the risk. But beneath all the practical considerations was a deeper question. Did she want Owen Ryder as her partner? Did she want him in her life permanently, woven into her daily existence through shared business interests? The answer, she realized, was yes. Not just as a business partner, but as something more. She had been holding herself apart from him, protecting her heart, telling herself she could not afford romantic entanglements when she was struggling just to survive. But Owen had been patient and steady, showing up week after week with his wildflowers, never pushing, never demanding, just being there. And somewhere along the way, she had fallen in love with him. The realization was both exhilarating and terrifying. The following Sunday, Nora was ready when Owen arrived. She had spent the morning dressing with unusual care, choosing her best dress, pinning her hair up in a softer style than her usual practical bun. When the bell chimed and Owen walked through the door, she saw his eyes widen slightly, taking in her appearance. "You look lovely," he said, then seemed embarrassed by his own boldness. He held out the flowers he had brought, a bundle of the last autumn asters, deep purple and gold. "Thank you for the flowers and the compliment." Nora took a deep breath, steadying her nerves. "I have been thinking about your offer, the partnership, I mean. I would like to accept if the offer still stands." Owen's face broke into a wide smile. "It stands. I am glad, Nora. I think we will make a good team." "I think so too." She paused, then decided to be brave. "Owen, I have to ask you something. These wildflowers you have been bringing me every week for months now. Why?" She watched his expression shift, saw surprise and something else, something vulnerable, cross his face. He took off his hat, turned it in his hands, clearly gathering his thoughts. When he finally spoke, his voice was quiet but steady. "When I rode into Deadwood that first day, I picked those flowers without really thinking about why. They were just growing there on the hillside, bright and beautiful in the middle of all that rough country. And I suppose they reminded me that there was still beauty in the world, even in hard places. Then I met you, and you were like those wildflowers. Strong and beautiful, blooming right where you were planted, making something good out of difficult circumstances. I kept bringing you flowers because I wanted you to know that someone saw that. Someone saw you, Nora, really saw you, and thought you were remarkable." Nora felt tears prick her eyes. It was the most honest, heartfelt thing anyone had ever said to her. "Owen, I know I am just a drifter with no family and not much to my name," he continued, the words coming faster now as though he needed to get them all out. "I know you could do better, probably should do better. But I have come to care for you deeply, Nora. These months of knowing you, of watching you work so hard and never complain, of seeing your kindness to customers even when you were worried sick about money, of noticing the way you smile when you think no one is looking. I have fallen in love with you, and I know I have no right to say it, but there it is." For a moment, Nora could not speak. Her heart was so full she thought it might burst. Then she walked around the counter, closing the distance between them, and took his hands in hers. "You are wrong about one thing," she said softly. "You are wrong that you have no right to say it. You have every right because I have fallen in love with you too." Owen looked stunned, as though he had not dared hope for such an answer. "You have?" "Yes, you stubborn, patient, wonderful man." "How could I not? You fixed my shelf and asked for nothing in return. You bring me flowers every week, the most thoughtful gift imaginable. You offered to invest your life savings in my struggling store. You see me, Owen, and you make me feel valued in a way I never have before." "Nora," he breathed, and then he was kissing her. It was gentle and sweet, full of all the restrained longing of the past months. Nora melted into it, her hands coming up to rest on his chest, feeling his heart pound beneath her palms. When they finally broke apart, both were breathless. "I suppose this makes us more than just business partners," Owen said, his eyes sparkling with happiness. "I certainly hope so," Nora replied, laughing. They stood there in the quiet store, hands clasped, smiling at each other like fools. Outside, Deadwood went about its business, but inside, a new partnership had been formed, one built on more than just business interests. The changes to the store began immediately. Owen used his knowledge of ranching to help Nora select inventory that would appeal to the area's ranchers: quality rope, leather goods, specialized tools, veterinary supplies. He visited the surrounding ranches, talking to owners and foremen, learning what they needed and could not easily get. Meanwhile, Nora reorganized the store's layout, creating dedicated sections for different types of goods, making everything easier to find and more appealing to customers. The partnership worked seamlessly. Owen had a good head for business despite his lack of formal education, and his practical experience complemented Nora's organizational skills and customer relationships. Within weeks, they were seeing increased traffic. Ranchers who had previously ordered supplies from distant catalogs began stopping by the store. Word spread that Owens and Ryder General Store, as it was now called, carried quality goods at fair prices and was run by people who knew the ranching business. But even as the business grew, Nora found herself most treasured the quiet moments with Owen. The way he would catch her eye across the store and smile. The way he always made sure she took breaks and did not work herself to exhaustion. The way he listened when she talked about her father, sharing memories both happy and sad. The way he kissed her goodbye at the end of each day before riding back to the Patterson Ranch, kisses that grew longer and more passionate as the weeks went by. "You should move into town," Nora said one evening in late October as they stood outside the store, reluctant to part. "The ride back to the ranch every day is long, especially as winter approaches. You could rent a room at the boarding house." "I have been thinking the same thing," Owen admitted. "Though there is another option we could consider." "What is that?" "You could marry me." The words were simple, direct, but Nora heard the nervousness beneath them. "I know we have not been courting long by conventional standards, but I know my own heart, Nora. I want to spend my life with you. I want to build this business with you, build a home with you, build a future with you. So yes, I am asking you to marry me." Nora felt joy bubble up inside her like a spring. "Yes," she said simply. "Yes, I will marry you, Owen Ryder." His whoop of happiness drew startled looks from passers-by, but neither of them cared. Owen swept Nora up in his arms, spinning her around, both of them laughing. When he set her down, he kissed her thoroughly, right there on the main street of Deadwood with the whole town potentially watching. They were married 3 weeks later in a simple ceremony at the small church on the edge of town. Lily stood up as Nora's witness, and Tom Patterson stood up for Owen. Mrs. Patterson had insisted on hosting a reception at the ranch, and half the town seemed to show up. There was food and music and dancing, and Nora thought she had never been so happy in her entire life. The newlyweds moved into the small house behind the store, the one Nora had shared with her father. It needed work, but Owen set about making improvements whenever he had spare time. He repaired the roof, fixed the drafty windows, built new shelves and cabinets. Nora sewed curtains and made the place feel like a home. For the first time since her father's death, she felt the tight knot of worry in her chest begin to loosen. She was not alone anymore. She had a partner in business and in life. Winter arrived, bringing snow and cold that blanketed Deadwood in white. Business slowed as it always did in winter, but it was still better than previous years. The store had built up enough goodwill and regular customers that they maintained steady sales even in the slow months. Owen and Nora used the quieter periods to plan for spring, to organize inventory, to discuss expansion ideas. But they also simply enjoyed being married. Long evenings by the fire, talking about everything and nothing. Mornings waking up beside each other, the miracle of that proximity never quite wearing off. Stolen kisses in the store when no customers were around. Learning each other's habits and preferences, the daily intimacy of shared life. "I never thought I could be this happy," Nora confessed one snowy evening as they sat together on the small sofa Owen had bought as a wedding gift. She was curled against his side, his arm around her shoulders, watching the fire crackle in the hearth. "Neither did I," Owen said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head. "I spent so many years drifting, never feeling like I belonged anywhere. And then I rode into Deadwood and saw you through that window, and something just clicked into place. Like I had been searching without knowing what I was searching for, and suddenly there you were. Do you ever miss it? The drifting, the freedom of the road, not even a little bit. This is what I wanted all along, I just did not know it. A place to belong, work that matters, a woman to love who loves me back. I am exactly where I am supposed to be, Nora." As winter gave way to spring, several developments brought changes to Deadwood. A new sheriff was appointed after Sheriff Coleman decided to retire, his wounded arm never quite healing properly. The new sheriff, a capable man named Anderson, made it his mission to bring more law and order to the rough mining town. Several of the more troublesome saloons were shut down, and the outlaw element that had plagued the area began to move on to less vigilant towns. Harold Marsh returned in April, still interested in buying property. He approached Nora and Owen at the store, his smile not quite reaching his eyes when he saw their wedding rings. "I see congratulations are in order," he said smoothly. "I had hoped you might reconsider my offer, Mrs. Ryder, but I suppose with a husband to help you, you feel more confident in keeping the business." "The business is doing quite well, Mr. Marsh," Nora said coolly. "We have no interest in selling. Pity. I am prepared to increase my offer substantially." "Our answer is still no," Owen said firmly. There was something in his tone, a hardness that Nora rarely heard, that made Marsh's eyes narrow. "Everyone has a price, Mr. Ryder. Not everything is for sale. The lady said no, and I suggest you respect that." Owen's hand moved to rest on the counter, near where Nora knew he kept a pistol out of sight of customers. It was a subtle movement, but Marsh caught it. The businessman's expression soured. "You are making a mistake. This town has a limited future. Once the gold plays out, Deadwood will be a ghost town and your little store will be worthless." "Maybe so," Owen said, "but it will be our little store, worthless or not. Good day, Mr. Marsh." After Marsh left, his displeasure evident in the sharp slam of the door, Nora let out a breath she had not realized she was holding. "That man makes me uneasy. Me too. There is something off about him. The way he talks about buying property, it is like he is trying to gobble up the whole town." Owen frowned. "I am going to have a word with Tom Patterson, see if Marsh has approached him too. And maybe Sheriff Anderson should know there is a man pressuring business owners to sell." Over the following weeks, they learned that Marsh had indeed approached several property owners, always offering prices that seemed generous but came with pressure tactics and vague threats about the town's future. Sheriff Anderson took note but pointed out that Marsh had not actually broken any laws. Making business offers, even unwelcome ones, was not a crime. But Marsh's presence cast a pall over what should have been a happy, prosperous time. Spring brought increased business as ranchers prepared for the summer cattle drives. The store was busier than ever, and Nora and Owen had to hire help for the first time. They took on young Billy Carter, a 17-year-old whose father worked in the mines. Billy was eager and hardworking, quick to learn, and having him handle basic tasks freed Nora and Owen to focus on the more complex aspects of running the business. In May, Nora realized she was pregnant. The realization came gradually, confirmed by the doctor in a brief, embarrassing examination. She told Owen that evening, nervous about his reaction despite their often discussed hopes for children. Owen's face went through a series of emotions: surprise, wonder, fierce joy. "A baby. We are going to have a baby." "Yes. The doctor says probably December, around Christmas." Owen let out a shout of pure happiness and swept Nora into his arms, then immediately set her down with a panicked expression. Should I not be doing that? Will it hurt the baby? Nora laughed, her nerves dissolving. I am pregnant, Owen, not made of glass. You can still hug me. A baby, he repeated, shaking his head in amazement. Our baby. Oh, Nora, I am going to be a father. And I am going to be a mother. It is terrifying and wonderful all at once. They spent the evening making plans, discussing names and how they would convert the small second bedroom into a nursery and all the preparations that would be needed. Nora felt a contentment settle over her that was different from anything she had experienced before. This was more than happiness. This was the deep satisfaction of a life being built on solid foundations, of dreams taking tangible shape. The summer was busy and prosperous. The store thrived. The debts that had once seemed insurmountable were steadily paid down, and Nora's pregnancy progressed without complications. She bloomed with it, her face glowing, her earlier thinness filling out into healthy curves. Owen was attentive to the point of being overprotective, constantly worrying that she was working too hard or lifting things too heavy. It drove Nora slightly crazy, but she recognized the concern for what it was. Love expressing itself through action. In August, trouble arrived in the form of a range war brewing between two rival cattle operations north of town. The conflict spilled over into Deadwood when cowboys from both sides got into a brawl in one of the saloons. The fight left 2 men seriously injured and the saloon half destroyed. Sheriff Anderson arrested several men, but tensions remained high. The situation escalated when someone burned down a barn at one of the ranches, killing several horses. Each side blamed the other. The violence was spiraling, threatening to engulf the whole region. Tom Patterson, respected by both sides, tried to mediate, but his efforts were rebuffed. It was Nora who came up with the idea. What if we hosted a meeting? She suggested one evening as she, Owen, and the Pattersons discussed the situation over dinner at the ranch. Neutral ground, here in town. Both sides come, no weapons allowed, and we hammer out their differences like civilized people instead of armed camps. They would never agree to that, Sarah Patterson said doubtfully. They might if the alternative is having Sheriff Anderson call in federal marshals, Owen said slowly. The territorial government is cracking down on range wars. If this escalates much more, we will have troops in the area, and that would be bad for everyone. Tom Patterson nodded thoughtfully. It is worth trying. And the suggestion coming from townspeople, rather than one of the ranches, might carry more weight. Shows this is affecting the whole community. The meeting was scheduled for the following week at the town hall. Sheriff Anderson made it clear that anyone arriving armed would be arrested on the spot. To everyone's surprise, both sides agreed to attend. The meeting was tense, the air thick with resentment and barely suppressed anger. But slowly, through hours of painful negotiation, common ground was found. The conflict, it turned out, was mostly based on misunderstandings about water rights and grazing boundaries. With clear agreements written out and witnessed, much of the hostility dissipated. It was not a complete resolution. The 2 ranchers in question would never be friends. But the immediate danger of violence had passed, and the region could return to its usual rhythms. You did a good thing, Owen told Nora that night as they prepared for bed. That idea of yours likely prevented bloodshed. We all did a good thing, Nora corrected, but I am glad it worked. This territory has enough troubles without people fighting each other over things that can be resolved with conversation. As autumn arrived, Nora grew large with pregnancy. She could no longer handle the heavier tasks around the store, and Billy Carter proved his worth by stepping up to take on more responsibility. Nora focused on the books and customer service, working from a stool behind the counter so she could rest her swollen ankles. Owen was, if possible, even more protective than before. He fussed over her constantly, bringing her water and snacks, adjusting her stool cushion, asking if she was comfortable at least a dozen times a day. "If you ask me one more time if I am comfortable, I am going to throw this ledger at your head," Nora finally snapped one afternoon in November, then immediately felt guilty when she saw Owen's hurt expression. "I am sorry. I know you are just worried, but I am fine, Owen. Pregnant women are not invalids. I know. I just want everything to be perfect for you and the baby. It already is perfect because you are here with me." Nora reached for his hand, squeezing it. "I love you even when you drive me crazy with your hovering." "I love you too," Owen said. "And I promise to hover less." "Maybe." The baby came on a snowy December night, 2 weeks before Christmas. Nora had been feeling cramping all day but insisted on keeping the store open, not wanting to lose the pre-holiday business. It was only when her water broke while she was helping a customer that she finally admitted the baby was coming. The next hours were a blur of pain and effort. The doctor was summoned, and Mrs. Patterson and Lily came to help. Owen paced the small house like a caged animal, forbidden from the bedroom where Nora labored. He could hear her cries of pain through the walls and felt utterly helpless. Finally, in the early hours of the morning, a new sound joined the night, the sharp wail of a newborn baby. Mrs. Patterson emerged from the bedroom, tired but smiling. "You have a son, Owen, a healthy, beautiful boy, and Nora is fine, just exhausted." Owen practically ran to the bedroom. Nora lay propped against pillows, her hair damp with sweat, her face pale but radiant. In her arms, wrapped in a soft blanket, was a tiny red-faced infant with a surprising amount of dark hair. "Owen, meet your son," Nora said softly. Owen approached slowly, almost reverently, as though afraid he might break something. He looked down at the baby, at the impossibly small fingers and the eyes that were trying to focus, and felt his heart expand in a way he had not known was possible. "He is perfect," Owen whispered. "You are perfect. I cannot believe he is ours." "What should we name him?" Nora asked. They had discussed names throughout the pregnancy but never settled on one definitively. Now, looking at their son, Owen knew. "Oliver," he said. "Oliver James Ryder, after my father and yours." Nora's eyes filled with tears. "That is perfect. Hello, Oliver. Welcome to the world, little one." The baby squirmed and made a small noise, and both parents laughed with delight at this evidence of his personality. Owen sat carefully on the edge of the bed, putting his arm around Nora and gazing at their son. The first light of dawn was breaking through the window, illuminating the small family in soft gold. "I never imagined my life could be this full," Owen said. "A home, a business, a wife I love more than breathing, and now a son. How did a drifter like me get so lucky?" "You brought me wildflowers," Nora said simply. "Week after week, you brought me wildflowers and asked for nothing in return. You showed me who you were through those simple gestures, and I fell in love with the man I saw. This life we have, Owen, we built it together. This is not luck. This is what happens when two people choose each other and work to make something beautiful." "I will bring you wildflowers for the rest of our lives," Owen promised. "Every week, no matter what." "I am going to hold you to that," Nora said, smiling. Little Oliver chose that moment to start crying in earnest, and Nora laughed as she adjusted him to nurse. Owen watched his wife feed their son and felt a peace settle over him that he had been searching for his entire life. This was home. This was where he belonged. The weeks after Oliver's birth were exhausting but joyful. The baby was healthy and had good lungs, which he demonstrated frequently in the middle of the night. Nora recovered well from the birth, though she was tired in a way she had never experienced before. Owen took over most of the store duties with Billy's help, allowing Nora to focus on the baby. The town rallied around the young family. Customers brought gifts for the baby, meals for the parents, offers of help. Mrs. Patterson was a frequent visitor, delighting in the baby and giving Nora advice based on her own experience raising 3 children. Lily knitted endless tiny garments and visited almost daily to coo over Oliver. Christmas arrived, and the small house behind the store was transformed. Owen cut a small pine tree from the hills and set it up in the front room, and Nora decorated it with strings of popcorn and paper ornaments. They had few presents to exchange, money still tight despite the business's improvement, but it did not matter. The best gift sat between them in his cradle, sleeping peacefully for once. "Last Christmas, I was alone," Nora said quietly as she and Owen sat by the fire on Christmas Eve, Oliver finally asleep after a fussy evening. "My father had just died, the store was failing, and I could not see a way forward. I felt so hopeless." "And now?" Owen asked, though he thought he knew the answer. "Now I have everything I ever wanted and things I did not even know to want. A husband who loves me, a son who is healthy, a business that is thriving, a future that looks bright instead of grim." She turned to look at Owen, her expression tender. "You did that, Owen. You rode into my life and changed everything." "We did it together," Owen corrected. "You were never as hopeless as you felt, Nora. You kept fighting, kept the store going, kept moving forward even when it was hard. I just gave you a little help. And wildflowers. Do not forget the wildflowers." Owen laughed. "How could I forget? Those wildflowers got me the best thing that ever happened to me." The new year brought new challenges and opportunities. Word of the store's success had spread, and they began getting inquiries from other towns about opening additional locations. It was tempting, but Nora and Owen decided to focus on their Deadwood store for now. With a new baby and the business still growing, expansion could wait. Harold Marsh appeared one last time in February, making a final offer for the store and other properties. When Owen and Nora refused, his pleasant mask finally slipped. "You people are fools," he said coldly. "This town is dying and you are too stupid to see it. The gold is playing out, the mines are closing. In 5 years, Deadwood will be a ghost town, and you will be sitting in this miserable little store with nothing." "Then I guess we will be poor together," Owen said calmly. "But we will still have each other and our son, and that is more valuable than any amount of money you might offer. Now get out of our store, Marsh, and do not come back." Marsh left in a fury, and true to Owen's words, they never saw him again. They learned later that his real estate speculation scheme had been based on fraud, and he was eventually arrested by federal marshals in Denver. Several people lost money in his schemes, but Owen and Nora were not among them. As the years passed, the store continued to thrive. Deadwood did not become a ghost town as Marsh had predicted. While some of the gold mines did play out, the town evolved, finding new economic foundations in ranching, timber, and its position as a supply hub for the Black Hills region. The store grew with the town, eventually expanding into the building next door. Oliver grew from a baby into a curious toddler, and then into a bright, energetic boy. He loved the store, loved helping his parents even when his help sometimes created more work. Customers doted on him, and he learned early how to charm extra pieces of candy from the jar his mother kept behind the counter. 3 years after Oliver's birth, Nora had another baby, a daughter they named Olivia. 2 years after that, twin boys arrived, Samuel and Simon. The small house behind the store became crowded with children and chaos and laughter. Owen built an addition, expanding the space to accommodate their growing family. Through it all, Owen kept his promise. Every Sunday, without fail, he brought Nora wildflowers. In spring, lupines and columbines. In summer, sunflowers and wild roses. In autumn, asters and goldenrod. In winter, he brought pine cones and evergreen branches, holly when he could find it. The tradition became part of the family routine, something the children looked forward to. They would accompany their father on his weekly rides into the hills, learning to recognize different plants, learning to appreciate the wild beauty of the land they called home. "Why do you bring Mama flowers every week?" Oliver asked one spring morning when he was 8 years old. He and his father were riding through the hills, the grass green with spring growth, wildflowers blooming everywhere. "Because flowers are beautiful, and your mother deserves beautiful things," Owen explained. "But also because it is important to show the people you love that you are thinking of them. Your mother works very hard, taking care of all of you children and helping run the store. I want her to know that I see that work, that I appreciate it, that I love her. The flowers are my way of saying all of that." "Will I bring flowers to someone when I grow up?" Oliver asked. "If you find someone you love as much as I love your mother, then yes, you probably will. Maybe not flowers, maybe some other gesture, but you will want to show that person how much they mean to you." Oliver considered this as they dismounted and began gathering flowers. "I think Mama is lucky to have you, Papa." "I think I am the lucky one," Owen said, ruffling his son's hair. "Now, what do you think? Lupines or the Indian paintbrush?" "Both," Oliver declared. "Mama likes when we bring lots of colors." When they returned home, Nora was in the store helping a customer, baby Simon on her hip while Olivia played with blocks in the corner. She looked up when Owen and Oliver entered, and her face brightened into the smile that still made Owen's heart skip a beat even after years of marriage. "You brought my flowers," she said, as she did every week. "Always," Owen replied, as he did every week. It was a simple exchange, worn smooth by repetition, but it held the weight of their history. Every bouquet was a reminder of that first bundle of flowers brought by a dusty stranger, of the patient courtship that followed, of the moment Nora finally asked why, and Owen's answer made her smile. It was a reminder of everything they had built together, all the struggles they had weathered, all the joys they had shared. Nora set Simon down and took the flowers, her fingers brushing Owen's. "Thank you," she said softly, "for the flowers, for everything." "Thank you for saying yes when I asked you to marry me," Owen said. "Best decision I ever made, asking that question. Best decision you ever made, saying yes." "I think we have made a lot of good decisions together," Nora said, glancing around the bustling store at their children playing at the life they had built. "We have at that," Owen agreed. He leaned in and kissed her. A quick kiss because they were in the store and there were customers and children around, but a kiss that conveyed everything words could not. The years continued to roll by, marked by the changing seasons and the steady rhythm of their life together. The children grew, the business prospered, the town evolved. Owen's hair started to go gray at the temples, and laugh lines formed around Nora's eyes. They were no longer the young couple just starting out, but a partnership tested and proven by time. When Oliver turned 18, he announced his intention to go to college in Denver, to study business and then return to help expand the family store into a larger operation. It was a mark of how much had changed that the child of a shopkeeper and a former drifter had such opportunities. Owen and Nora were proud, even as they worried about their eldest leaving home. The other children were growing as well, developing their own personalities and interests. Olivia loved numbers and spent hours helping her mother with the store's books. Samuel was fascinated by ranching and often spent time at the Patterson Ranch, learning the business. Simon was the artistic one, always drawing, always noticing colors and patterns. "We made good humans," Nora said one evening as she and Owen sat on the porch of their home, watching the sun set over the Black Hills. The children were all inside, the older ones helping the younger with homework, the sounds of their voices drifting through the open windows. "We did," Owen agreed. "Sometimes I look at them and cannot believe they are ours, that we created these whole people with their own thoughts and dreams." "Do you ever miss it?" Nora asked. "The life you had before, the freedom of the road?" Owen was quiet for a moment, considering. "No," he finally said. "Not even a little bit. That life was just me searching for this one, for you, for our family, for a place to belong. I found it all here in Deadwood, and I have never looked back." "I am glad you picked wildflowers that first day," Nora said. "I am glad you brought them to me week after week. I am glad I finally asked you why. And I am glad my answer made you smile," Owen said, taking her hand. "That smile, Nora, that was when I knew I had a chance. That was when I let myself hope that maybe, just maybe, you felt the same way I did." "I did, I do, I always will." Nora leaned her head on Owen's shoulder, comfortable in the silence that followed. They had said these things to each other countless times over the years, but they never lost their meaning. The sun sank lower, painting the sky in shades of orange and gold. Somewhere in the distance, a coyote called. The evening was peaceful, the kind of peace that comes from a life well lived, from choices made and not regretted. "You know what tomorrow is?" Owen asked. "Sunday," Nora said. "You will ride into the hills and bring me flowers, like you have every Sunday for over 20 years. 23 years next month," Owen corrected. "And yes, I will bring you flowers. I will always bring you flowers, Nora. Until my last breath, I will bring you wildflowers and tell you that you are loved." "I know," Nora said simply. "And I will always treasure them because they are not just flowers. They are a promise kept week after week, year after year. They are proof that some things endure, that some love stories do not fade." Inside the house, one of the children called for help with something. Nora rose to go attend to whatever small crisis required a mother's attention. Owen watched her go, this woman who had transformed his life, and felt the now familiar surge of gratitude. He had wandered for so long, searching without knowing what he sought. And then he had found it in a struggling store in a rough mining town, in the person of a young woman with river-colored eyes and a core of steel. The next morning dawned clear and cool, the first hints of autumn coloring the leaves. After breakfast, Owen saddled his horse and rode into the hills, as he had done every Sunday for over 2 decades. The route was familiar now, the places where the best wildflowers grew marked in his memory like old friends. He dismounted near a meadow where late-season flowers bloomed in abundance. The asters were especially fine this year, deep purple and gold, hardy flowers that thrived even as the weather began to turn cold. He gathered them carefully, selecting the best blooms, already imagining Nora's face when she saw them. As he worked, he thought about all that had changed since that first time he had picked wildflowers to bring to the store. He had been a stranger then, rootless and uncertain, carrying flowers as much for himself as for any recipient. Now he was a husband, a father, a successful businessman, a respected member of the community. He had a home, a family, a future. All because he had brought wildflowers to a woman who needed to see that someone noticed her struggles, her strength, her worth. The ride back to Deadwood was pleasant, the morning air crisp and clear. When Owen arrived at the store, it was already open, Nora at the counter assisting an early customer. She looked up when the bell chimed, and even after all these years her face still brightened when she saw him. Owen approached the counter and laid the wildflowers down with a flourish. Asters and goldenrod, fresh from the hills. Nora finished with her customer, then picked up the flowers, breathing in their subtle scent. "They are beautiful, Owen, thank you." It was the same exchange they had every week, simple and comfortable. But then Olivia, now 16 and working in the store on weekends, spoke up from where she was stocking shelves. "Mama, can I ask you something? Why does Papa bring you flowers every single week? I mean, it is sweet and all, but he never misses. Not once in my entire life. There has to be a story there." Nora and Owen exchanged glances, smiling. They had told their children the story of how they met, of course, but perhaps not all the details. "Would you like to tell it, or shall I?" Nora asked Owen. "You tell it," Owen said. "You tell it better than I do." So Nora told their daughter and the few customers in the store who had paused to listen about a dusty stranger who rode into town carrying wildflowers. About a business struggling and a woman alone trying to keep her father's legacy alive. About a man who offered help without expecting anything in return, who brought flowers week after week, patient and steady, waiting for her to notice him, to see him, to maybe someday love him back. "I finally asked him why after months of him bringing flowers," Nora said. "I needed to know what he wanted, what he was hoping for. And his answer, well, it was perfect." "What did he say?" Olivia asked, caught up in the story. Owen cleared his throat, slightly embarrassed to be put on the spot. "I told her that she reminded me of those wildflowers, strong and beautiful, blooming where she was planted, making something good out of difficult circumstances. I told her that I wanted her to know someone saw that, saw her, and thought she was remarkable." "And that made you smile?" Olivia asked her mother. "That made me smile," Nora confirmed, "and made me realize I had fallen in love with the man who had been bringing me flowers all those months. The man who saw me, really saw me, and thought I was worth the effort of those weekly rides, those weekly gestures. Your father showed me through his actions who he was, and I liked what I saw." "So you married him," Olivia said. "So I married him," Nora agreed. "Best decision I ever made. Well, second best. Best decision was taking his partnership offer for the store, which led to everything else. And I keep bringing the flowers because a promise is a promise," Owen said. "I told your mother I would bring her wildflowers for the rest of our lives, and I meant it. Every week, no matter what, she gets her flowers. It is my way of reminding her and myself of where we started and how far we have come together." Olivia was smiling now, her eyes a bit misty. "That is really romantic, Papa. Your father is a romantic, even if he does not look like one," Nora said fondly. "Though I will admit, I did not see it at first. I was too busy being practical and worried about money and keeping the business afloat. But he was patient with me, never pushed, just kept showing up with his flowers and his steady presence. Eventually, I could not help but fall in love with him." The conversation shifted then, customers needing attention, the work of the day calling. But Olivia caught her father's eye later and gave him a thumbs up, making Owen laugh. His children were good kids, all of them, and he knew how lucky he was. As autumn deepened into winter, the family fell into their familiar rhythms. Oliver came home from college for Christmas, full of ideas about expanding the business, about modernization and new opportunities. Owen and Nora listened, proud of his education but also amused by his youthful certainty that he had all the answers. "We will consider your suggestions," Owen told his son. "But remember, this business was built slowly, carefully on relationships and reputation. We cannot change everything overnight just because some new business theory says we should. I know, Papa. I just want to help make it even better. And we appreciate that. But trust that your mother and I know what we are doing. We have been at this for over 20 years now." The winter was mild, allowing Owen to continue his Sunday rides into the hills. The flowers were sparse this time of year, but he always found something. Evergreen branches, red holly berries when he could locate them, dried seed heads that had their own stark beauty. Nora continued to treasure each offering, continued to place them in the mason jar that had become a fixture on the store's counter. Spring arrived, as it always did, with a rush of new growth and returning warmth. The wildflowers bloomed in abundance, and Owen's Sunday offerings became spectacular again. Lupines and Indian paintbrush, columbines and wild roses, all the bright colors of the Montana hills. One Sunday in May, Owen returned from his ride to find the store unusually busy. There was some kind of commotion, raised voices, and his heart sank. Had something happened? Was someone hurt? He pushed through the door to find Nora behind the counter, arms crossed, facing down a well-dressed couple who were clearly upset about something. "I do not care what the catalog said, this is what we have in stock," Nora was saying firmly. "If you want something different, you will need to place a special order which will take 4 to 6 weeks. This is completely unacceptable," the woman shrilled. "We were promised immediate availability. I have a mind to report this store to the territorial authorities for false advertising." Owen stepped forward, setting his wildflowers down and moving to stand beside his wife. "Is there a problem here?" the man bristled. "Your wife is being completely unreasonable. We were told this store carried a full line of imported goods, and she is claiming you do not have what we need." "We carry a full line of goods appropriate to this region and its needs," Owen said calmly. "If you were told we stock imported luxury items, someone misinformed you. We are a general store serving ranchers, miners, and townspeople, not a boutique catering to the wealthy." "Well, I never," the woman huffed. "Come along, Herbert." Clearly these people are not equipped to handle customers of quality. The couple stormed out, slamming the door hard enough to make the bell jangle wildly. Nora let out a long breath, her shoulders sagging slightly. "Are you all right?" Owen asked, concerned. "Fine. Just tired of people expecting us to be something we are not." Nora rubbed her temples. "They came in with unrealistic expectations, then got angry when reality did not match. I tried to be polite, but they were determined to be offended." "You handled it well," Owen assured her. He picked up the wildflowers and handed them to her. "Here, maybe these will improve your day." Nora's face softened as she took the flowers. "They always do." She leaned in and kissed Owen's cheek. "Thank you for the flowers and for backing me up with those people." "Always," Owen said simply. That evening, as they closed up the store and headed home, Nora was unusually quiet. Owen recognized the signs that she was wrestling with something, so he waited patiently for her to speak. "You ever wonder if we should have done things differently?" Nora finally asked as they walked through the gathering dusk. "Built a fancier store, catered to wealthier customers, tried to be something more than what we are." "No," Owen said immediately. "Nora, we built this business to serve the people who live and work in this region. We provide quality goods at fair prices to folks who need them. That is nothing to be ashamed of. Those people today, they are not our customers and never will be. Let them go to some fancy store in Denver if that is what they want. We do not need to change who we are to please people like that." "I know you are right. It just got under my skin, the way they look down their noses at everything, at me, at the store, at the whole town. Then they are fools who do not see what really matters." Owen stopped walking and turned to face his wife. "Nora, look at what we have built. A successful business that has lasted over 2 decades. 4 healthy, smart children. A home full of love, respect in our community. That is worth more than all the imported luxury goods in the world." Nora smiled, the tension leaving her face. "You always know what to say to make me feel better." "That is my job," Owen said. "Well, one of my jobs. The other is bringing you wildflowers every week." "And you have never failed at either job," Nora said, taking his hand as they resumed walking. "Not once in 23 years." The years continued their steady march. Oliver graduated from college and returned to Deadwood, bringing with him a young woman named Elizabeth whom he had met at school. They married a year later, and soon Oliver was working full-time at the store, implementing some of his modernization ideas with his parents' cautious approval. Some of them worked well, increasing efficiency and profits. Others proved impractical for their particular situation. It was a learning curve for everyone. Olivia went to college herself, studying accounting, determined to help manage the business side of the family enterprise. Samuel stayed in Deadwood, working for Tom Patterson and eventually taking over management of the ranch when Tom retired. Simon pursued art, moving to Denver but returning frequently to visit, his paintings starting to sell and make a name for himself. Owen and Nora became grandparents, first to Oliver and Elizabeth's daughter Margaret, then to a succession of other grandchildren as their children married and started families of their own. The house that had once been crowded with their own children became a gathering place for the extended family, especially during holidays. Through all of it, through every change and challenge, Owen continued his Sunday ritual. Even as his hair went fully gray, as his joints started to ache on cold mornings, as the years marked his face with lines, he rode into the hills every Sunday and brought back wildflowers for Nora. "You do not have to keep doing this," Nora told him one Sunday when they were both in their 50s. "I know the ride gets harder as we get older." "I made a promise," Owen said simply. "Until my last breath I bring you flowers. That is not negotiable, Nora. You are a stubborn man, Owen Ryder. You knew that when you married me," Owen pointed out. "I did," Nora agreed, smiling. "And I would not change a thing." The store eventually passed to the next generation, with Oliver taking over as primary owner while his parents retired to advisory roles. Owen and Nora found themselves with more free time than they had had in decades. They traveled a bit, visiting Simon in Denver, taking a trip to Texas to see the town where Owen had grown up. But mostly, they were content to remain in Deadwood, watching their family grow, enjoying the rhythms of a life well lived. On their 30th wedding anniversary, the family threw a large celebration. Nearly the entire town seemed to attend, testament to the respect and affection the Ryders had earned over the decades. There were speeches and toasts, laughter and good food. Owen and Nora stood together, greeting guests, accepting congratulations, marveling at how their lives had unfolded. 30 years, Nora said softly during a quiet moment. "When I think about that scared young woman running a failing store, I can barely recognize her." "She is still in there," Owen said. "Strong and determined, making the best of difficult circumstances. That woman never went away, Nora. She just got to stop being scared because she found someone to share the burden." "We shared everything," Nora corrected. "The burdens and the joys, the struggles and the successes. That is what marriage is, what partnership is. I could not have done any of this without you. And I would have kept drifting forever if I had not found you," Owen said. "We saved each other, Nora. That is the truth of it." Their grandson Tommy, Oliver's son, approached then with a question that made both Owen and Nora smile. "Grandpa, is it true you have brought Grandma flowers every single week since before you got married?" "It is true," Owen confirmed. "Why, I mean, that is a lot of flowers over a lot of years." Owen and Nora exchanged glances, the question bringing back memories of the beginning, of the first hesitant steps toward what would become a lifetime together. "Would you like to show him?" Nora asked. "Show me what?" Tommy asked, curious. "Come on," Owen said, leading his grandson toward the door. "Let us go for a ride." They rode into the hills, grandfather and grandson, the late summer sun warm on their backs. Owen took Tommy to the meadows and hillsides where wildflowers grew, teaching him which ones were which, showing him how to select the best blooms. "I bring your grandmother flowers," Owen explained as they gathered colorful bouquets, "because I want her to know every single week that I am thinking of her, that I appreciate her, that I love her. When you love someone, Tommy, you show them, not just with words but with actions. Consistent, reliable actions that prove your words are true." "But why flowers specifically?" Tommy asked. "Because when I first met your grandmother, I saw strength and beauty in her, just like I see in these wildflowers growing in hard ground, blooming despite the harsh conditions. I wanted her to see that I understood that about her, that I valued it, so I brought her flowers that reminded me of her. And she liked them, she did. Eventually, she loved them. Eventually, she loved me. And I have been bringing her flowers ever since, keeping the promise I made all those years ago." Owen straightened, his arms full of late blooming asters and goldenrod. "Love is not just a feeling, Tommy. It is a choice you make every day, a commitment you honor through your actions. These flowers are my way of making that choice, week after week, year after year." Tommy nodded slowly, absorbing the lesson. "I hope I find someone I love that much someday." "I hope you do too," Owen said. "And when you do, you treat her right. You show up, you keep your promises, you appreciate her even when life gets hard. That is what makes love last." They rode back to town together, Tommy carrying his own bundle of wildflowers that Owen had helped him gather. The boy was thoughtful on the ride back, occasionally glancing at his grandfather with new respect. Back at the celebration, Owen presented Nora with her weekly flowers, to applause from the assembled guests. It had become a sort of legend in Deadwood, this cowboy who brought his wife wildflowers every Sunday without fail. Young couples looked at the Ryders and hoped their own marriages would be as strong. Older couples looked at them and recognized kindred spirits, fellow travelers on the long road of commitment. As the evening wound down and guests began to depart, Nora and Owen found themselves alone in the garden behind their house. The sounds of the celebration faded, leaving just the two of them and the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. 30 years, Owen said, echoing Nora's earlier words. "It has gone by so fast and yet feels like I have known you forever." "I know what you mean," Nora said. "Sometimes I look at you and still see that young man who walked into my store offering to fix my shelf for information instead of money. Other times it feels like we have always been together, like I cannot remember a time before you." "No regrets?" Owen asked. "Not a single one." "You?" "None. Marrying you was the best thing I ever did, Nora. Every day since has been a gift." They stood in comfortable silence, hand in hand, two people who had built a life together through patient daily choices, through kindness and commitment, through wildflowers and steady love. The years continued to pass, as they do. Owen and Nora grew older, their children grew into full adulthood with children of their own, and those grandchildren began having children. The store remained a fixture in Deadwood, now run by the third generation of Ryders. The town itself evolved with the times while maintaining its essential character. And every Sunday, without fail, Owen rode into the hills and brought back wildflowers. Even when arthritis made his hands stiff, even when climbing on and off the horse became difficult, even when his children worried it was too much for a man his age, he continued the tradition. It was a promise, and Owen Ryder kept his promises. On a Sunday morning in late spring, Owen woke to find Nora still sleeping beside him, her face peaceful in the early morning light. They were in their 70s now, married for nearly 50 years. The house was quiet. Their children long since moved into homes of their own, though family visited frequently. Owen dressed quietly, not wanting to wake Nora. She had not been feeling well lately, nothing serious according to the doctor, just the general tiredness of age. She needed her rest. The ride into the hills was slower than it had been in his youth, but no less meaningful. Owen knew every trail, every meadow, every place where the best wildflowers grew. This morning, he found a patch of lupines so perfect they took his breath away, their purple blooms vivid against the green grass. He gathered them carefully, adding some white columbines for contrast, creating a bouquet he knew Nora would love. When he returned home, he found Nora awake and sitting at the kitchen table, a cup of tea steaming in front of her. She smiled when she saw the flowers. "You went without me," she said. Their grandchildren sometimes accompanied Owen on his flower-gathering rides, but recently Nora herself had started joining him when she felt up to it, reliving the routes they had traveled together for so many years. "You needed your rest," Owen said, presenting the flowers. "But look what I found. Do you remember this meadow? It is where we took Oliver on his first ride when he was barely old enough to sit on a horse." "I remember," Nora said softly, taking the flowers. "You were so worried he would fall off, even though you were leading the horse at a walk." "I was terrified," Owen admitted, "but he loved it just like he loved everything about the outdoors, just like all our children did." "We gave them a good life," Nora said. "A good foundation. They are all doing well, all happy. We should be proud." "I am proud," Owen said. "Of them and of us, and of everything we built together." Nora looked down at the lupines, her eyes misty. "Do you know what I think about when you bring me these flowers?" "What?" "I think about that first bundle you brought all those years ago. How I was too proud and too scared to let myself hope that you might be interested in me. How you just kept coming, week after week, never giving up, until I finally let my guard down enough to ask why." She looked up at Owen, her eyes shining. "Your answer changed my life, Owen. When you said I was like the wildflowers, strong and beautiful, blooming where I was planted, something inside me healed. I had felt so alone, so overwhelmed, so inadequate. And you saw me, really saw me, and thought I was remarkable. That gave me the courage to let myself love you." Owen moved to sit beside her, taking her hand in his. Their hands were both marked with age spots, the skin thin and delicate, but the grip was still strong. "You were remarkable. You are remarkable. That has never changed, Nora. We are both getting old," Nora said softly. "The time we have left is shorter than the time we have had." "I know," Owen said, "but whatever time we have, we will spend it together, just like we have spent the last 50 years, and you will keep bringing me flowers." "Until my last breath," Owen promised, as he had promised so many times before. Nora leaned her head on Owen's shoulder, and they sat together in the quiet kitchen, the lupines bright on the table between them, the morning sun streaming through the windows. It was a moment of perfect peace, of love tested by time and found true. The seasons continued their cycle. Summer arrived, hot and dusty. Autumn brought its blaze of color to the hills. Winter covered everything in snow. Spring returned, as it always did, bringing renewal and hope. Owen and Nora celebrated their 50th wedding anniversary with another large party, their extended family gathering to honor the milestone. There were now great-grandchildren, a whole new generation carrying the Ryder name forward. The couple stood in the center of the celebration, surrounded by evidence of the life they had built together, and felt nothing but gratitude. 50 years of wildflowers, Nora said during her speech, holding the latest bundle Owen had brought her. 50 years of this man keeping his promise, showing me every single week that I am loved and valued. If you young people want to know the secret to a lasting marriage, this is it. Show up. Keep your promises. Appreciate each other. Do the work, even when it is hard, especially when it is hard. And bring wildflowers. The crowd laughed and applauded, and Owen felt his heart swell with pride and love for this woman who had been his partner through everything. As the years continued to pass, both Owen and Nora's health began to decline in the way that is inevitable with age. But they faced it together, as they had faced everything else. When Nora's arthritis made it painful to walk, Owen was there to help her. When Owen's eyesight began to fail, Nora was there to guide him. They had spent their lives taking care of each other, and they continued to do so even as their bodies grew frail through it all. Owen kept his promise. The Sunday flower ritual continued, though sometimes Oliver or one of the grandchildren would drive Owen to the hills in a wagon when riding became too difficult. The flowers kept coming, placed in the same mason jar that had held that first bundle over 50 years before. One Sunday morning in early summer, Owen woke to find the sun already high in the sky. He had overslept, something that rarely happened. He turned to wake Nora, to tell her he needed to hurry if he was going to get to the hills and back at a reasonable hour, and found her still and peaceful beside him. She had passed away in her sleep, quietly and without pain, as anyone would hope to go. Owen sat there for a long moment, holding her hand, feeling the weight of 52 years of marriage settling over him. She was gone, his Nora, his partner, his love. The world suddenly felt empty in a way he could not quite process, but there was something he needed to do, a promise to keep. After the doctor had been called and the family notified after the initial shock and grief had been weathered, Owen insisted on making his Sunday ride into the hills. His children tried to talk him out of it, tried to convince him to rest, but he was adamant. "I promised her," he said simply. "Until my last breath, I bring her flowers." So Oliver drove his father into the hills in the wagon, understanding that his father needed this, needed to keep the promise one more time. They found a meadow full of wildflowers in the peak of their summer bloom. Lupines and Indian paintbrush, columbines and wild roses, all the colors of the Montana hills that Nora had loved. Owen gathered the flowers with shaking hands, tears streaming down his face. This would be the last bouquet he brought to Nora, the end of a tradition that had defined their relationship from the very beginning. But it was important to honor it, to keep the promise even in death. At Nora's funeral, Owen placed the wildflowers on her casket. It seemed fitting, this final offering from the man who had brought her flowers every week for over 50 years. As he stood there, saying his final goodbye, he remembered that first day he had walked into her store, nervous and hopeful, carrying wildflowers that seemed out of place in his calloused hands. He remembered her surprise, her eventual smiles, the moment she finally asked why and he told her the truth of what he saw in her. He remembered building a life together, day by day, choice by choice, wildflower by wildflower. "I kept my promise, Nora," he whispered. "Every week, until your last breath. I brought you flowers and showed you that you were loved. I hope you knew all those years. I hope you knew." After the funeral, as the family gathered at the house for the traditional meal, Owen's grandson Tommy approached him. Tommy was a man now, married with children of his own, but he remembered that ride into the hills with his grandfather years before, the lesson about love and commitment. "Grandpa," Tommy said quietly, "thank you for showing us all what real love looks like. Thank you for loving Grandma the way you did, for keeping your promises, for being an example to all of us." Owen looked around at his assembled family. His children and their spouses, his grandchildren and their families, his great-grandchildren running around with the energy of youth. This was the legacy he and Nora had built together. Not just the store that bore their name, but this whole network of people connected by blood and love and shared history. She was worth it, Owen said simply. Every flower, every ride into the hills, every year of our life together. Your grandmother was worth all of it and more. I am the lucky one that she chose to love me back. Owen lived for 3 more years after Nora's death. They were quiet years, spent with family, puttering in the garden, telling stories to the great-grandchildren who would sometimes ask about the grandmother they barely remembered. He never remarried, never even considered it. There could be no replacing Nora, no second chance at what they had shared. But every Sunday, even in his grief, Owen rode into the hills. He was too old now to go alone, so family members took turns accompanying him. And he still gathered wildflowers, though there was no longer anyone to bring them home to. Instead, he took them to the cemetery, placing them on Nora's grave, keeping the promise even in death. On a Sunday morning in late autumn, when Owen was 78 years old, Oliver drove his father to the cemetery as had become their custom. Owen gathered the last flowers of the season, hardy asters in shades of purple and gold, the same flowers he had brought Nora on their first anniversary so many years before. He placed them on her grave, as he did every week, and stood there silently for a long moment. Oliver waited in the wagon, giving his father privacy for his weekly communion with his late wife. When Owen returned to the wagon, he seemed tired in a way that went beyond physical exhaustion. "I think I am ready to go home, son." "Of course, Papa." They drove back to the house in comfortable silence. Oliver helped his father inside, got him settled in his favorite chair by the fire. Owen seemed content, at peace, his eyes drifting closed as he settled back into the cushions. "Thank you, Oliver," he said quietly, "for driving me today. For understanding why I need to keep bringing her flowers. I understand, Papa, you made a promise." "I did. Until my last breath," I told her. "I meant it." Owen's breathing was slowing, growing shallow. "I hope when I see her again, she will be pleased that I kept my word." "She will be proud," Oliver said, realizing with a start that his father was fading. "Papa, should I call the doctor?" "No," Owen said softly. "No doctor. Just sit with me, son. Tell me about your mother. Tell me about the first time I brought her wildflowers." So Oliver did, holding his father's hand, recounting the family legend that had been told and retold so many times over the years. The story of a cowboy who rode into town carrying wildflowers, of a woman struggling to keep her father's store alive, of a patient courtship conducted through weekly offerings of beauty plucked from the wild hills, of the question finally asked and the answer that made her smile, that started a love story spanning over half a century. Owen listened, a smile on his face, and as the story reached its end, his breathing stilled. He passed away quietly, peacefully in his own home, surrounded by the memories of a life well lived and a promise faithfully kept. At Owen's funeral, the family placed wildflowers on his casket, a fitting tribute to the man who had made them his signature. The whole town of Deadwood turned out to honor Owen Ryder, the cowboy who had arrived as a drifter and stayed to build a legacy. The store he and Nora had built together still stood on Main Street, now run by the third generation of Ryders. The family they had raised together carried their values forward. And the legend of the weekly wildflowers lived on, told and retold, a reminder that true love is not a feeling but a choice, made over and over again, week after week, year after year. In the cemetery on the hill overlooking Deadwood, Owen was buried beside Nora. Their shared headstone bore both their names, their dates, and a simple inscription chosen by their children. Together they built a life, together they rest. He brought her wildflowers until his last breath. Love endures. And every Sunday, without fail, members of the Ryder family continue to visit the cemetery, bringing wildflowers to place on the graves. The tradition continues, passed down through the generations, a living memorial to a love story that started with a simple gesture and became a legacy that would endure for as long as wildflowers bloom in the hills above Deadwood. The seasons continue to turn. Spring brings lupines and columbines. Summer offers wild roses and sunflowers. Autumn provides asters and goldenrod. Winter brings evergreen boughs and holly berries. And every Sunday, someone from the family makes the pilgrimage to the cemetery, carrying wildflowers, honoring the promise that Owen Ryder made to Nora Owens all those years ago and kept faithfully until his very last breath. The store still stands on Main Street in Deadwood, South Dakota, bearing the name Owens and Ryder General Store. Inside, on the counter, sits a mason jar that is always filled with fresh wildflowers. Customers who ask about it are told the story of Owen and Nora, of the cowboy who brought wildflowers every week and the woman who finally asked why. And his answer, spoken from the heart all those years ago, still makes people smile. Because love, true love, is not about grand gestures or dramatic declarations. It is about showing up. It is about keeping promises. It is about seeing someone truly, appreciating them fully, and demonstrating that appreciation through consistent, faithful action. It is about wildflowers brought week after week, year after year, until your last breath. It is about Owen and Nora Ryder and the life they built together in the Wild West town of Deadwood, one wildflower at a time.